Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, 3 High Liability Problems in the Safe Management of Outdoor Concerts, Festivals, and Special Events. Outdoor events, concerts, and fairs pose serious liability concerns for all parties. This program will provide plaintiff and defense attorneys with tools to identify potential liability issues and mitigate risk. Specifically, during today's program, our presenter will cover the following: the planning problem, prediction and prevention, why this doesn't happen, how security companies increase liability, and finally, management crisis, the disconnect that will cost you millions. The presenter for today's program is Mr. Dale Yeager. Dale began his education as a criminal analyst in 1988. He has extensive training in criminal psychology, forensic psychology, sex crimes investigations, crime scene forensics and procedures, and domestic terrorism analysis. Dale received advanced training at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center from 2005 to 2008. For the past 10 years, Dale has provided the security management training and security system redesign for the House of Blues, Live Nation Corporation, SBE Entertainment, and the Gaylord Hotel chain. Since 1995, Dale has trained over 100,000 local, state, and federal law enforcement officers in crowd control and security management at large-scale arenas and live events. His research on violence has been published in the FBI Law Enforcement Bulletin and Profiling Violent Crimes by Dr. Ronald Holmes. Dale is a frequent expert with the media outlets, including a featured appearance on an episode of the Forensic Files. Dale has lectured at many higher education institutions throughout the United States, including but not limited to Drexel and Howard universities. He's also an instructor for the Newman University Criminal Justice Program, and in 2002, Dale was given a presidential appointment to the U.S. Selective Service System, and in 2004, he became a member of the FBI's InfraGard program. Dale is also a federal law enforcement trainer for the HIDTA and McLaughlin programs. We will take 2 question and answer breaks during today's program. If you have a question, please use the chat or Q&A feature found on the right-hand side of the screen to submit your questions. We will try to answer them in the order in which they are submitted. We do ask that you take time to fill out the survey that will appear on the screen after today's program is over. And tomorrow morning, I will send an email out with a link to the archived recording of this program, as well as a copy of the PowerPoint presentation. And now I invite you to sit back, relax, and enjoy. I'm going to turn the presentation over to our distinguished guest, Mr. Dale Yeager. Dale, the program is now all yours.
Thank you, Matt. Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to talk about a very special issue that's very near and dear to my heart. I'm proud to have spent 22 years in the law enforcement criminal justice world. One of my great frustrations in my career has been watching the horrible, unprofessional way that live events, special events, concerts are managed in this country and in other countries. We work also in Canada. And today I'm going to talk about my frustration, but more importantly, I'm going to talk about solutions to the problem, where people go wrong, where they can correct that problem. Whether you're a plaintiff attorney or you are a defendant attorney, this will be relevant to both sides, and I'll make sure that I cover it from both angles. Frankly, the main issue is this. When we go to an event or when we send our children or our family members to an event, we expect those people to act in a professional manner to protect our loved ones and ourselves. The problem is that that's just not happening, and that the reason why there aren't more problems is sheer luck, certainly not planning. And so I want to talk about, first and foremost, Matt, my slide is not moving.
Okay, me try again real fast.
I got it. I'm sorry. I got it.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. First and foremost, I want to give you our mantra here at Seraph, which is a well-managed event is a safe event. The key issue is not equipment, it is management. And this is where it breaks down. This is where it doesn't even start. For most events, most sports arenas, nightclubs, that type of thing, is a lack of management. And when there is poor management, there are going to be safety and security issues. So, I had the distinct honor for 15 years of being a student of Dr. Peter Drucker. Some of you may know who Dr. Drucker was. For those of you who don't, this is the man who invented management process. That doesn't sound exciting, but it's a big deal. You have your title today because of this man. And before he came to the United States in the early part of the 20th century, there was no such thing in the world as management. He invented that and perfected it. Every great success that you've seen in nonprofit or for-profit corporations in the 20th century, more than likely Dr. Drucker was a part of that. And he's trained literally probably 1 million executives and leadership people in this issue of management. And I love this quote from Dr. Drucker. He used to drive this home to us. Management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. And this is where it breaks down in events, nightclubs, and sports arenas, is that you have people who are good managers. They know how to place someone. They know how to follow a set of rules, but they don't show any leadership because they don't want people to not like them. They want people to be their friend. That lack of leadership is where safety and security issues occur. I have a situation that occurred several years ago in Canada where a young man, 24 years old, very nice man, was 2 weeks away from his wedding. He took his fiancée and his mother to a concert at a sports arena. They were enjoying themselves, doing fine. The problem was that no one was managing or showing leadership during that concert. A group of males behind him were getting rowdy. Security didn't do anything. The ushers didn't do anything. People on site who were management people just figured that's a rock and roll concert. That's how people are going to act. Well, about an hour and a half into the concert, one of them fell on this young man's neck, broke his neck and his spine, and he's a quadriplegic 2 weeks before his wedding. Everybody blamed everybody else. But in the end, ultimately, as a legal expert, I had to point to the failure of never starting a management program. Basically, what you had in that concert were a lot of little fiefdoms that everybody was running on their own. No one wanted to take responsibility for anything. The leadership of that facility was not taking responsibility and showing leadership. And so ultimately, this young man suffers dramatically in a painful way each day because of people not being professional and not showing leadership. The second quote that Dr. Drucker is famous for, and I want you to focus on this for a moment, is you can only manage what you can measure. So the question I have for you, if you are an attorney or a law firm that defends nightclubs, sports arenas, well, what's the formal process that's in place to make sure on a weekly basis, on a daily basis, that the facility is being managed correctly? Are people assuming it's being managed? Is no one challenging the security director? Is no one challenging the owner? This is a serious issue. Clients who are bankrupt or out of business can't pay. And so, again, what is the formal process for determining, what to manage? How well is it? How effective is it? This is an important quote to remember as we go through this today. How security companies increase liability. I am not a fan of outside vendor security companies. I have found in 22 years in my professional experience that they are worthless. I have yet to be impressed with any of them. There are some professional companies that provide bodyguards and executive protection professionals which impress me. But when it comes to rank and file security guards in uniforms, I have yet to be impressed. In fact, they upset me a great deal because I find that, first of all, they work off of a very small profit margin, and they could care less about your client. And if you're a plaintiff attorney, this is where you need to focus your attention with an expert, is on what that contract says between the facility or the event and their vendor security company. Also, looking at that vendor security company to see, well, what kind of people did you hire? Did you do a 50-state federal criminal background check? I guarantee you that most security guard companies, and I have a pretty good experience, a vast experience with them across the United States. They do not do 50-state background checks. Well, if you're not going to do a federal criminal check, then you have no clue who you're hiring. In many cases, I find that they hire convicted felons routinely. And that brings up the other issue, which is the background issue. Well, who are you hiring? Besides a criminal background check, you have to look into their lives in other ways. And I find the failure of HR, if these security guard companies even have a human resources department, they're very poor at interviewing people, finding out details, determining whether that person is going to be a danger or not. Remember, you're depending on them to come to your event or come into your facility and actually provide security. Well, what kind of quality people are they? They're routinely paid $8 to $10 an hour, sometimes $12. That's a job that's not paid pays very high, so you don't get generally very good quality people. And so there's an issue there. Security guard companies, pay attention to this if you're a plaintiff attorney. Security guard companies have to be managed, and in that contract between the event or the venue, there has to be specifically laid out what the management structure is, how the owners, how the event management team is going to manage those security people. This is critically important, and I've seen this break down numerous times. The guards receive training relevant only to protecting their employers, not you. They're not looking out for your interests. If you have an event or a facility, they're looking out for whom? They're looking out for their employer. And this is part of the problem. The training is insignificant. Most of the time it's really about liability for for the people paying the check, which is the vendor that you hired. How are they looking out for you? And if you're a plaintiff attorney, this is where you need to be putting your attention, looking at this. It's critically important. Next, management crisis, the disconnect that will cost you millions. First of all, planning for security and emergency management requires proper training and extensive experience. You cannot teach or do what you have never done. Hypotheticals don't work in the security business. If you've never experienced a major catastrophe, a major emergency, you have no right to be in that business. But the question is, are you asking, if you're a defense attorney who represents a venue or a facility, are they asking the right questions of the people they're hiring? Are they asking, what's your experience? Well, I worked at this facility for 20 years. That means nothing. What is your experience in actually handling an emergency? What is your experience in dealing with crimes, in dealing with people? That's really more important than the CV or the resume. But that's a question that is routinely not asked, or no one attempts to prove what they're telling you. This is a problem. This is a serious issue that needs to be addressed, and it's generally not addressed. Next, Planning without assessment. What you don't know will hurt you and your event. So you go to the doctor. You've been seriously ill for several weeks. Doctor puts you in an examination room and looks at you and says, you know what? Tell you what we're going to do. I'm going to give you some medication. You go fill out this prescription, try this, and we'll see how it goes. Well, you would look at the doctor and say, well, wait a minute, doc, aren't you going to do any tests, or you're not going to diagnose what's wrong with me? No, I'm going to guess at it. I've had enough experience that I can just guess at it. And how fast would you leave that doctor and never go back? Pretty quick. That's the problem. Nightclubs, events, live events, fairs, sports arenas. The question is, well, where is the assessment before the planning? They have emergency plans. They have security plans sometimes. Well, where was the assessment done? When was there a security audit performed in that facility to find out what's working and what's not? Without the diagnosis, you can't treat the illness. And here again, if you're a plaintiff's attorney, this is where you need to be focusing your attention. Where was the assessment that was done to see if your plan actually works? Do you have a traffic safety plan, a traffic management plan? Well, how does it work? Have you evaluated? Is there an evaluation process after each major event to see what went wrong and what went right? Without the assessment, what are you doing? You're guessing at it. That is not professional. That's a liability bomb. So basic outline for security, safety, emergency management. Let's talk about what really should be happening. Well, step one, how will you assess the threats at your event? People have issues and secrets. VIPs have complicated lives and generally more critics and enemies than regular people. Well, if you're going to have an event that has any kind of VIPs, and that could be a local borough manager or city council person, that could be a state representative person, that could be a local celebrity. Well, who did the threat assessment on those VIPs to see if anybody's going to show up and cause them a problem? An ex-spurned lover, an ex-spouse, union people, protesters. What can you expect? Are you going to just deal with it when it happens, cross that bridge when you come to it? Here again, as plaintiff attorneys, you need to be looking at this and asking, well, what was the prep involved? What was the preparation? What was the pre-event assessment here? Same is true in nightclubs. We work in the major nightclubs in the United States and Canada. So you can't say that we haven't had that experience. We have to deal with VIPs all the time, major celebrities. But we already have built into our system for our clients the ability to assess and keep up-to-date information on those VIPs so there are no surprises. There are no surprises. The area that you will have your event in has issues. Flooding, construction, gangs. Gangs routinely now will go to a hospital opening or some type of affair and hurt somebody just to prove their willingness to be in a gang. You have to be prepared for that. I mean, are your security vendor company, are they interfacing? Are your management people interfacing with local law enforcement to see what can we expect? What are the threats? Is there a threat assessment done before the event? Better be, and if it's an ongoing event, you have to update it on a daily basis. There's a lot of work involved. It is not easy to do proper security and protect people and keep liability down. Again, if you're a plaintiff attorney, this is where you need to be looking. You need to be asking these questions. So, planning for the coordination of police, fire, medical, and security. Well, here's the list. Let's go through this list and see what we have. So you have 12 areas. Number one, you have planning. You have to have a planning meeting with the chief of police, the fire chief, the vendor security, on-site facilities, EMS, and parking vendors. Well, that meeting is very important. And one of the problems, one of the things that some of you know about, and some of you may not know, is that fire departments and police departments don't get along. You don't even want to know what happened on 9/11 in New York City. That was just embarrassing. And so the problem is that you have to ask yourself, well, who's going to run that meeting and who has experience with police, fire rescue, and all these other groups, to be able to deal with the arguing. And believe me, I've been in more than my share of these. And there's always arguing. You have to have someone who can be the quarterback. That's not easy to do. Number two, the area that you will have your event in. Again, you have to walk that. You have to assess that for your parking issues, for your traffic flow issues, which we're going to come to now, which is the traffic management plan. Well, who's going to run your traffic management plan? Well, Dale, we have a company that does that. Well, wait a minute. How do you know that they're competent? And I love when people say, well, I've been doing this for 20 years. Every one of you listening to this webinar knows someone who's been doing the same bad job for 20 years. Longevity doesn't mean that you're effective or professional at what you do. You could be doing it wrong for 20 years. So the question here is, well, who's running your traffic management plan? If you're having an event, or if you, in some cases, some of the nightclubs we work with, all the cars that come to that nightclub have to be parked by parking attendants, because there is no parking around these facilities because they're in major cities. Well, where are they going? Where are they taking those cars? Does that cause an issue at the end of the night? If you have a major event, hospital opening, a fair, whatever it happens to be, who's managing the traffic? Because police can only legally handle the traffic outside of the facility on the major highways. You're going to have to know what's going on. Next is security guard deployment plan. How are the security guards going to be deployed? Where are they going to be placed? That's a science unto itself. That's usually very poorly done. Who's managing these security guards? Who's going to watch them? Who's going to watch the managers of the security guards? If you've ever been to a casino, you know that the dealer's being watched by the pit boss is being watched by the floor manager, and vice versa. There's a system of about 7 different people watching everyone in a casino, and it works very effectively. So you have to know who's watching those security guards, making sure they're deployed in the right places. This is something as a plaintiff's attorney that you need to be asking. You need to be looking at these documents. You need to where's the plan? Where's your deployment plan? And by the way, you're going to find that in most events, there is no deployment plan. If you have a nightclub, they have to have a deployment plan every night because there's a different group coming in. And you have to deploy differently depending on the event. It can't be the same every night. Placement of ambulances and fire trucks. I can't tell you how many times I've seen this save people's lives. When you're having an event, when you're having some type of a concert, you've got to manage all that and make sure that you have ambulance and fire trucks on site. Many times fire chiefs do not want to deploy those trucks. They don't want to deploy the buses. And so you have to work that out. That takes some politics. But you have to have somebody on site in case an event occurs. In one case, we had a hospital opening of a beautiful $500 million facility. It's huge. And it rained. Hurricane-level rain came at the night of the VIP opening. Well, thankfully, we got a small pumper truck from the local fire department to be on site, which was not easy. It took a lot of wrangling. But they were able to use their system and pump water away from the tent so it didn't flood the tent, which had major celebrities and major Congress people in it. It would have been a disaster running those people out into gale force winds and pounding rain. So again, this is something that you have to think about. Next is an evacuation plan. Well, who has the authority to order an evacuation? That alone will take an hour of debate with fire, rescue, and police. Who's going to call for the evacuation? Is it a soft evacuation? Is it a hard evacuation? There are different levels of evacuation. How are you going to get your VIPs out? How are you going to get people out? They're going to all jump in their cars and dash out the door and clog everything up. You have to put this together. This is unique and it has to be customized. A severe weather plan. I just talked about, gale force winds and pounding rain. I've been in situations where hurricanes hit us. Tornadoes went across a parking lot. What are you going to do about severe weather? You've got to have a plan on how to handle that. Fire emergency plan. That's very important. Crime response plan. How are you going to respond to crimes, minor and major? Because that can cause embarrassment to people, especially VIPs. You have to know how to handle all that. Medical emergency plan. I've literally seen a medical emergency plan save an elderly woman who had a stroke at a VIP event. Okay, I've seen an overdose of methamphetamine of a person working in a kitchen for a caterer. This young man was 24, 25. This medical emergency plan saved this young man's life and saved this elderly woman's life. I've seen the value of them. A protester plan. Are protesters going to show up? Pretty much now, any major event's going to have protesters. Even a county fair will have protesters. So because of the animals on site, PETA will show up. How are you going to handle them so you don't cause a PR disaster? All right? Communication plan. Can all the players talk to each other, and how will you know? Guess what? I'm telling you right now that in most nightclubs, there's always dead spots where the two-way radios do not work. And so no one's ever done a radio check. No one's updating the communication. That's a disaster waiting to happen. Same is true of events, county fairs, concerts. You have people that can't even speak to each other. You have to do a radio check and find out if fire rescue, police, and the security and the managers can all speak to each other. Is there special channels for them to speak privately about private matters? Each channel has to be coordinated. A lot of work involved in a communication plan. Maps with all planned location of personnel. You have not just a map of the security guard deployment, but you have to have a general map of where everybody's deployed. And this is true of a nightclub too, not just an event or a concert. And so it's very important that we talk about what really is involved. This is important. Lastly, step 3 is very simple. It's the command team. Who will quarterback your security and emergency plan? You can't just have a plan and then say, well, I'm sure that somebody will run it. I've seen those situations end up in court more than I can count on my hands and feet. Doesn't matter. Absolutely does not matter what you think. It's what is proper planning and what is professional to do. You're going to have a quarterback to oversee that security plan and emergency plan. And they can't be doing other things. They have to be focused just on that. Otherwise, you will have a disaster. You will create a liability bomb. And by the way, those of you who are plaintiff attorneys who maybe have lawsuits pending against an event or a nightclub or some type of a sports arena, this is critically important. Who is running the show? And how you ask your questions in your depositions is critically important also. To know how they acted, and can they prove that what they said they did, they actually did. Most times they're not telling the truth. So, in conclusion, and then I'll let Matt organize all the questions that you have. In conclusion, it's critically important to understand the complexity of proper security and emergency management. What many people do, and I've actually had nightclub owners come to me, and even sports arena owners, not as much, but come to me and say, you know what, I just don't care. And I go, well, that's not a very good attitude. I don't care. Dale, if I get sued too much, I'll shut down and open up under a new name. I just don't care. And I'm going to tell you right now, any of you who go to concerts, any of you who go to nightclubs, you should be afraid. Because if I'm afraid in those places, you should be afraid. Because many times they don't care. They care about the bottom line, but they don't care about the people. For them, it's just a building to make a buck. And if it gets too bad, they don't care. They'll shut down, move on to something else. So ultimately, this is important to understand the complexity of this, both as a defense attorney representing your clients and also as a plaintiff's attorney. It's very important to understand that. So what I'll do now is turn it back over to Matt, and he can field any questions that you might have for me. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Dale. There's a lot of very good information in there. We're going to turn the program over now to kind of interactive question and answer session. So please do feel free to use the Q&A or chat features to submit your questions to Dale, and I pointed out where you can do that. Dale, should a security plan be a formal, detailed written plan, or merely a set of guidelines? Is there any downside to having a very detailed plan, either because of what is contained in the plan or what may be missing?
I love this question because this is one we get from our clients all the time. Here's the bottom line. You have to have a formal written plan. Now, as all of you know as attorneys, anything written down and anything it's discoverable in a lawsuit. But the bottom line is, I hear this all the time. Attorneys for nightclubs or sports arenas, not as much sports arenas, but nightclubs in particular, will say, hey, don't put it on paper, just use general guidelines. It's easier for me to defend you. Well, let me tell you something. That doesn't work, because I've been able to destroy that kind of thinking very quickly for the last several years, and Matt has been the spectator to those cases that I've worked on for the plaintiff side. And the thing is that if you don't have it written down formally, first of all, it's unprofessional. Number two is it's immature. Number three is that it's just going to cause you problems. Why would you want to cause problems that are going to affect your emotional state as leaders, meaning the owners, but also your financial bottom line? So yes, it should be written down. All these policies should be written down, and they should be revised, and they should be looked at on a regular basis. That's the proper professional way to do it. And there's no downside to writing it down other than the fact that you have to live up to those standards. A lot of times people don't want to write anything down in formal policies because they want to wing it. They want to do what they feel like when they feel like it. That's no way to run a proper business. That's not being professional, and that's how people get hurt and how people lose their jobs and how places go into bankruptcy. That's been my experience. So good question.
Okay, we have another question here. What do you think of the practice of having local police officers assisting in house security for certain events?
I'm a big fan of that, with one exception. You have to understand their limitations. When you hire police, they cannot do security completely. You still have to have your own security personnel. The reason why is because they have liability issues that have to be addressed, and you'll notice that when you have a letter of agreement with a local police department, which your clients should all have, and something, by the way, if you're a plaintiff attorney, you should be looking for that letter of cooperation. They have different names for them. But the bottom line is that law enforcement officers are not trained in security management. Let me say that again. Police officers are not trained in security management. They don't know anything about it. And so it's critically important to know their limitations. You can't depend on them 100%. And so this is something to remember. But yes, I'm a fan of them, using them in proper places, but where do you put them is based on an assessment, the assessment like I talked about, and proper planning. Where do I need them and where do I need to place them? Because they're not the end all for security. Good question.
Hey, Dale, in most of these events, or in all of these events, the venue's bringing in a lot of different outside vendors for various tasks and for various supplies. How should the security plan and the 12 areas of security that you touched on with the last slide, how should that be coordinated with all the outside vendors that are coming in? And what's the responsibility of the venue to coordinate that?
Well, first of all, if you are hiring outside vendors, you need to do due diligence or background checks on all your vendors. I don't care if they supply straws or food or chairs. They all need to be assessed because they are a threat also. Vendors create a lot of crime. They ask any local law enforcement. Vendors who come to events, their employees cause a great deal of crime, a lot of sexual assault. So you have to actually manage your vendors. But I would assume, and I'm being facetious here, that your owners or the managers of these events actually are doing that. The problem again is that you have to remember that everybody coming in is a potential threat, and you have to mitigate that threat. I mean, hence the name risk management. But as far as security vendors, and if you're going to hire a security guard company, here's part of the problem. Most fairs or events or concerts, they'll go to a one-stop shop, which is a nightmare. Some company that provides the food service, they provide the ushers, they provide the security guards. Well, the problem is that, again, why would you go to a company that is an octopus that does a million different things? How can they be expert in any of those things if they're doing, they're supplying people for everything? They're all subbing it out. We find them to be the greatest weakness. And if you're a plaintiff attorney, you need to be looking again at these contracts with the vendors. Very important. I think I see someone with their hand up. Matt?
Yeah, it's Joel. I'm trying to get his question from him. So, Joel, if you have a question, please use the chat feature or the Q&A feature to submit your question, and we'll get it to Dale as quickly as we can. Dale, we have a couple more questions here while we're waiting for Joel's to come in. Obviously, in a lot of these open-air events and closed-in events, alcohol is an issue. And how should the venue or the organizing party coordinate with those who are distributing alcohol to make sure that it's managed properly and safely?
Well, that's your food services person. So in a nightclub, the question is, well, how good is your food services manager, whoever's in charge of beverages and if you have food, are they managing well? It goes back to the comment that I made reading those quotes from Dr. Drucker. As far as in an event or a fair or a concert, again, you have to include your food services person. Whoever is the head of that has to be included in all the security planning, because you need to let them know specifically what you expect of them. And one of the things that you expect of them is proper training in that state law, because they do vary. Everybody who works for them, part-time or full-time on an event, have to be set down and trained in the law and understanding how to identify people who are high or drunk so that you can mitigate that risk. So that's all part of the security process. People don't think of food and beverage as part of the security process, but it absolutely is. And that's just a matter of planning, pre-training. And you say, well, Dale, that's going to cut into our profit. Well, listen, that's just part of doing things right. It shouldn't cost you, it shouldn't affect your profit. It should actually increase your profit. Security is a profit center if you run it correctly. People think of it as a cost, but it's a profit center. And you have to think differently outside the box as a person, whether you're an attorney or a business leader. You have to think outside the box on this type of thing. But that's a good question also. So
can you talk about a little bit of the responsibility of the venue and the organizing party to monitor individuals or groups that have been asked to leave the venue? Is there a proper procedure for them?
Absolutely.
Exit, and how should they be monitored once they leave?
Once you've kicked somebody out, first of all, the question is, well, why in the world did your security people not know that they were going to be a problem when they walked in the door or through the gate? That means that you're not managing the ingress. There's ingress and egress. You're not managing ingress correctly because you stop all problems at the gate. So you have to rewind back and say, well, how did they not catch that this group was going to be trouble? Because that's not difficult to do. It's not difficult to teach. Secondly, why didn't someone not know that they were becoming an issue before it got to a point where they had to be thrown out? That means that your crowd is not being managed or monitored correctly. That means these people don't have the experience or the training to do it correctly. Once they are kicked out, now you're going to have to assign someone to your exit points. You have to assign someone to work the two-way radio to make sure that everybody knows that they are out a description of those people so that they can't sneak back in, and they try to sneak in all the time, which creates even further liability. So there's a lot of work once you kick somebody out. It's much easier to deny them access early or to keep them under control during the event. Also, from a financial perspective, to keep them under control, make sure they behave themselves so you don't have to kick them out, they also spend more money. That's good for the bottom line. But that's just kicking people out. That's a serious situation that really brings up some major questions about your system, your management quality, and the management of your and the quality of your security staff. Good question.
Okay, great, Dale. We have a question here from Jason who asks, what would the obligations of the security be to make sure that illegal drugs are not coming onto the premises during a large outdoor weekend concert event?
Well, I think that's a responsibility, from my experience, between local law enforcement and the event management people. If you're going to have any kind of an event, you don't have to just worry about drug dealers dealing to your patrons. You also have to worry about prostitution. And don't be surprised, folks. It's a very common problem in nightclubs, very common problem in concerts, and very common problem in county fairs where families go, where pimps will come, or women or men will come, young women and men will come, who work on their own and try to find tricks. It's a very common problem, and it can create a major nightmare for you. So don't just think about drugs, think broader perspective. As far as the drugs are concerned, again, that's about your security staff being professional, well-trained, and well-managed to be looking for that. You cannot find what you are not looking for. And so it's not hard to find that. And where's most of it happening? In the bathroom. And where do we find a lack of security management? In the bathroom. You have to assign a female just to monitor bathrooms, in and out, every 15, 20 minutes in bathrooms, just to monitor the bathrooms. A male has to go in and out of those bathrooms. This is part of what we call the roving patrol concept. You have to do that. That's how you manage a facility. And if you're a plaintiff attorney, you need to be looking at this. Where's the plan? Where's the roving patrol? How did you manage your bathrooms? You know, there's so many places to look from whoever you are, whatever side you represent. You need to be understanding the complexity of this. This is not something simple. And all of on my staff, I have 3 retired U.S. Secret Service agents, including 2 management-level Secret Service agents. And, a lot of the process that we teach is actually from the Secret Service playbook. Guess what? It works very well. They've had a great success rate. Even with the attempted assassinations over their history, which is well over 100 years, their success rate is about 99%. So it works. There's a way to do it and a way not to do it. But good question on that one.
We have a question here about the products that are sold at an event. What is the liability, or where does the liability fall of a venue for the sale of a defective product by a third-party vendor which sold the defective product at the event?
Well, I only deal with security and emergency management. That's a whole other animal that's outside of my world. So I really, that's something that the listeners of the webinar and the viewers of the webinar would know a lot better than I do on product liability issues. That's not a security emergency management issue. So I would defer to all of you who are attorneys on that.
Okay, great. We have a question here from Joel who asks, should each of the $8 to $10 security guard have some equipment that allows for their communication with all other guards or supervisors? If so, what type of equipment should they be outfitted with?
Well, that's a great question, Joel. You know what aggravates me is that security guard companies are so cheap, they won't give all their guards two-way radios. That's something in your RFP process that you have to ask. Here's the equipment we require you to have. We require all your guards to have this list of equipment. And by the way, if you're a plaintiff's attorney, you have some kind of action against an event or a concert or a nightclub, this is another area where your expert needs to be asking questions is, well, let me see the proposal, the RFP and the proposal. That's where it really breaks down. So here's what they need to have. They need to have a small tablet that they can carry in their pocket with a small pen so that they can make notes, so they don't have to rely on their memory if something goes wrong. And we teach this, by the way. Number two, they need a small flashlight. If the lights go out, well, how are they going to see anybody if they don't have a flashlight? So a small flashlight. Number two, they need a two-way radio, preferably digital, because analog radios generally don't work very well outside of the venues or in certain areas of the venues. Digital, it's a stronger signal. Again, you still have to test your radios. And they should have a cell phone on them as a backup communication device. What if they're stuck in some major emergency happens at the event? They're stuck off in some corner. They're two-way radio guys. They have no backup. There is no plan A without a plan B. So let me review again. Small tablet and pen. They must have a small flashlight. They must have a two-way radio and a cell phone as a backup. That's minimum. That is minimum. And so that should be included inside of your RFPs. If your clients have RFPs for vendors, that should be included. If you're a plaintiff attorney, again, look at that stuff. So read that information. See if they actually knew what they were doing when they asked this company to come on board. That's critically important. Good question.
Okay, we have a couple more questions here. The questions are coming in fast and furious, and I'd ask everyone to keep the questions coming in. I think this is a good dialogue here. Dale, what is the responsibility of the venue to monitor, secure, oversee all the rides, especially in fairs and festivals, and what sort of plan should be in place to make sure that the supervision is adequate?
Well, again, that's outside of emergency and security. That's straight liability risk kind of stuff. So, again, if something occurs where someone gets hurt on a ride, then the emergency plan kicks in. But as far as the management, I would say my answer to that goes back to the Dr. Drucker statements, which is that you have to have leadership, good quality leadership and management in place. If they're sitting on their can and not doing anything and not managing the employees and not keeping them pushing a little bit to keep them focused and doing their job, that's how catastrophes happen. So as far as the management of rides, that's outside of my world, but it still comes down to a management issue. It always comes back to a management issue. So sorry I can't elaborate on that more.
No, that's fine. We have a question here from Don, who asks, what limitations or how should a security team deal with an individual or group who has weapons, whether it be guns, knives, etc.? How should that be dealt with in an outdoor event, concert, festival, fair? Well,
there's two parts to that question. Whoever asked it, you don't realize it, but there's two parts to that question. First of all, you have patrons who come in with weapons. Well, if they got into your event with weapons, that means that the security people were never trained in weapons detection. This is something we teach even to, we have a whole division that does work in schools. And we teach this to teachers and principals. It takes about 15 minutes. It's not difficult. And you can tell if someone's hiding a weapon, what kind of weapon they're hiding, where it's at, so that you can deny them entrance. Again, this is a failure of the door, a failure of controlling ingress. If they are caught with a weapon, if they suspect that a weapon is on that person, they need to monitor them and immediately call law enforcement to deal with them. Otherwise, you can get killed. I keep thinking about that video that's on YouTube. I actually know one of the police detectives that investigated that crime, It was a Midwestern university, and there were 4 college students who were on the defensive. They were basically part of the defensive line of this school's football team. Huge, 6'1", 6'2", 6'3", 240, 280, 300 pounds, big guys, very strong, young. In comes a little guy, and there's security video of this, little guy that's about 5'5", maybe 130 pounds soaking wet. He's talking to them for a moment, and then he pulls out the gun. These 4 guys try to wrestle this gun away from a 130-pound, 5'5" kid. He kills 3 of them and wounds the 4th. And I keep telling males this because they don't seem to listen. If you don't know how to disarm a weapon from another human being, if you've never been trained and you don't practice that, don't ever try it because you'll get killed. And here's a great example of that. I don't care if you wrestled, I don't care if you played football. That has nothing to do with security or self-defense or martial arts. You got to know how to do that stuff, and most people do not, including a lot of law enforcement. So that takes training, and so stay away. They should be trained to, in the policy, again, monitor the person, call law enforcement right away, 911, get them out here. We got a guy with a weapon. And the good news is when you make us think about that kind of stuff, it really lowers the amount of people that bring that type of thing the next day, bring weapons to your event, because you put out a clear signal that we're not going to tolerate that. That's part of the social engineering that is a key to security. Good question.
Okay, we have a question here from Jason who asks, what steps should be taken to ensure that there is a proper amount of emergency medical personnel on site, and should any extra measures be taken when there's some sort of history at a venue, whether it's drug or alcohol use, overheating, dehydration, et cetera, et cetera?
Well, that goes back to what I talked about earlier, which is the assessment. You have to assess what the needs of those people are going to be, and that includes weather conditions, what crimes you're going to most likely suspect, and you've got to put a plan together for that event that talks about all of those issues and how you're going to mitigate them, reduce those. I mean, at outdoor events, having stations with water, sprayer systems to spray people down like they do at Disney World. You have to plan for that, but you have to assess first what the needs are for that event, what month it's going to be. What if it's going to be a month where there's a lot of rain? June sometimes in the South has a lot of rain, so you got to focus not just on heat but also on rain. But that all comes back to doing a proper assessment, and you got to have somebody that knows how to do that assessment. That's the critical part. And if you're a plaintiff attorney listening to this, you know what I'm going to say. Look at that. Was there an assessment done? Was there a plan made specific to that event that covers these potential medical issues or other disasters? Good question. Very good question.
And to follow up on that question, are there any specific ratios of security/emergency management personnel per attendee that should be followed, or any resources that can kind of point people into where they would find those ratios?
Well, say the question again. I'm sorry. Say it again, Matt.
Are there any sort of guidelines or standards for how many security or emergency personnel there should be based on the size of the crowd?
Oh, well, listen. Yeah, that's been. You can actually go to usdoj.gov, the Justice Department website, and there are studies dating back into the 80s about that. But there is no way that anybody is going to financially afford that ratio. It's generally, for live events, it's generally 1 for every 50 people. Security person, 1 for every 50 or 1 for every 60. You can stretch it to sometimes 70, but generally that's just not financially feasible, or people don't want to do it. I think it's the right ratio. We all know in crowd control and law enforcement enforcement, crowd control, and security management, that's the right thing to do. But generally, judges frown on that, and they see it as unrealistic. So it's kind of a no-starter. But again, there has to be a ratio that you come up with for your nightclub or your event. I mean, if you have a nightclub, for example, that has generally 400, 500 people a night, and you got one security guy, that's ridiculous. You're asking for a problem. If you have an outdoor event that has 5,000, 6,000 people at it, and you got 10 security people, well, that's the other side of ridiculous. That's too little. You have to find a happy medium, and that's where planning can help you stretch out your resources to make it financially feasible but also effective. And that's a balancing act. That takes some skill. Matt, I have a question here from John Rappaport. Do you see that question?
Yeah.
It says, can you please discuss the limitations upon a $10 security guard, say at a grocery store, does not have a gun, to stop and restrain shoplifters or other hooligans? I can think of a case where a shoplifter stealing a pack of smokes was choked to death. Well, in that case, jurisdictions vary on use of force, so that would be a key element, is where this took place, or where that security guard is, and what they're allowed to do. That varies. Secondly, that's just the lack of training. If they choke somebody to death, no one should be choking anybody. It doesn't matter how big the person is. That's just a lack of training. That's that they're going to childhood wrestling moves. That's not professional emergency or security management. If you're choking someone, there's no need to choke someone, ever. No need at all. There is much easier ways to do it, even if you're small and that person's large. So what you're describing is the limitations are the quality of the person. Are they in shape? Do they know the law? And are they properly trained? I mean, that's really, it comes back to the same whole things I've been discussing during the webinar. So.
Okay, and here's maybe be our last question, if not second to last question. Are there any articles or books that have checklists for developing security plans for outdoor events like the ones we discussed today?
Sadly, there are not. There aren't. And the ones that are out there are really lacking. They're either unrealistic or they miss major pieces. There just isn't any resources out there. They're horrible. Even the national organizations, the closest I would say to, they don't have a checklist, but the closest I would say to an outline of a professional outline of how to manage events would be from As Is, the American Society of Industrial Security. They certainly have some guidelines, but no checklist. We invented this 12-step program for this back in 1992, but we've never published it because it's proprietary. But we share it with people in the webinars because I want people to understand what professional security and emergency management should look like in these events or in these facilities. But no, there's nothing really out there. There is some reports post 9/11 from Homeland Security on event management that I would strongly urge you to look up on Google or on the internet. There's documents out there, but nothing with a checklist. No, just guidelines, basic guidelines. So. Okay,
Dale, as we enter the outdoor season, what advice would you give to either plaintiff and defense attorneys, but also venue managers about how to mitigate the risk and how to go about things here from now until Labor Day?
Well, if you're an attorney who represents an owner of a nightclub or an outdoor venue or whatever, you've got to stand your ground, and you've got to tell these event planners and event management people, listen, from a purely professional legal perspective, we need to have an assessment done for this event or for this ongoing event or for this nightclub, we need an assessment done to diagnose what's working and what's not. That's step one. That's the only step that matters at this point, because as you're going into the spring and the summer, either you're guessing at it, and then you're gambling, you're throwing dice against the wall and hoping for the best, or you're doing it in a professional manner so that you can go to sleep at night and not have to stress out and worry. So the answer is very simple. A professional security and emergency management assessment has to be performed to determine what's working, what didn't work last year in the previous season, what do we need to change. And here's the good news. Most of the time, at least in our work, I would say a little over 80% of the time, we don't recommend anything that costs money. We recommend management changes and policy changes. They don't cost a dime. So it's not an issue of you have to have a big budget to do it. It's an issue of understanding human behavior and having the experience to know what to anticipate and how to mitigate that risk. So that would be my statement to those on that side of the conversation today.
Excellent, and thank you, Dale, for another great presentation. I think there are a lot of takeaways that can benefit both plaintiff and defense attorneys, but also venue owners and operators and those who are working at the venues. Just very briefly here, we'd like to wrap up today's program. If you would like to speak to Dale Yeager about a specific matter that you're working on, you can contact us here at TASA. Our telephone number is 800-523-2319. As I stated during the introduction, tomorrow morning I will send out a link to the archive recording of this program. The archive recording will also be posted in our Knowledge Center. If you visit tasanet.com and click on the Knowledge Center, you'll be able to go to the full list of all of our previous programs and watch them at your convenience. Our next webinar for legal professionals, Self-Contained Playground Equipment Litigation, will take place next Thursday, March 21st at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll be receiving an invitation to that program probably in the next day or so. If you have any follow-up questions or comments, please feel free to email me at mhyde@tasanet.com. You'll be receiving a follow-up email from me at about 3:30 Eastern Time today. You can just respond to that email. But we do take all of your comments under consideration, and they do help us to produce better programs in the future. So please feel free to send me your comments, and we'll take them under consideration, or I'll definitely respond to them as quickly as I can. Other than that, I look forward to seeing you at future TASA events, and would be happy to help you with any of your expert needs. We'll see you at another TASA event. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Dale.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.